I promised that we'll do some specialty 4-thread techniques that I didn't have the time to do with any of the other classes. So I'm threading the machine with the normal 4-thread overlock, and on this time I will just put serger threads on all 4 positions. So I will put both needles, and then I put my stitch length to start with at 3 millimeters, and I will put my stitch width the widest on my first sample. Again, I can really use any of these settings. Stitch selector needs to go to A, and then the wave selector still at the overlock side. These ones are the same as before, but then a reminder, we need to disengage my subsidiary looper before I thread the loopers, because the subsidiary looper, when it's over the eye of the looper, it kind of prevents the thread. This thin thread might even go through it. Sometimes it can, sometimes it doesn't. But we definitely do not have to have, or we should not have that subsidiary looper at the same time when there's thread. So my little rule always is that in the overlock stitches, you have to have something in the upper looper. If there's no thread, we'll put the subsidiary looper. If there's thread, we will take it out. Never ever both. Why we shouldn't have both? Well, my thread can get caught onto that little hook, and it can bend it, and that means the whole replacement, the whole upper looper. So we don't want to do that. So again, if I go through my checklist, on my 4-thread, they may not show that one as clearly, so just as a reminder that we need to take that one out. And then we go through the threading, just pretty much as we did on number 1 class. Okay, the first technique that I'll be using the 4-thread overlock now is to make piping. Yep, I could always purchase piping. I could make it in a sewing machine, but I like usually make my own piping because then I can use the fabrics that I like. I can have them more coordinating with my fabrics. So there are a few examples that I have done. On this first one, I didn't even have a filler cord. It was, I guess, looked like almost like a shoelace kind of thing, but any kind of a filler cord in, and I had sewn it inside a piece of fabric to create the piping. On these other samples, I had used the 3 different thicknesses, kind of the thinner, medium weight, and really thick one. Well, the thick one is one of those ones that I had to change my settings a little bit. I could not anymore use the 4-thread overlock. I needed to use the 3-thread overlock narrow, because otherwise my left needle would have been going all the way through that heavy cording. So this is not normally something we would do with the serger, but I just had to try that one too. But these 2 thicknesses work great. The third and the very last one what I have, that's the one I'm demonstrating on my live sample. So I have just the ordinary cotton or polyester filler cord, and then I'm gonna be using the cording foot. And the letter, this one says P5, P for piping, but the foot is called the cording foot. For the 8-thread machines, that's the only cording foot that is available. On the 4-thread sergers, we have P3 and P5. The difference is that the P3, the groove is 3 millimeters, and then on the P5 is 5 millimeters. So if I have really thin cord in the P3 will work better on those ones, but the P5 would work also. I've used that one on even with the thinner cording too. And then on this one, I again reminded to put those settings using the foot, and then we'll put the filler cord on the wrong side of the fabric, and it can be cotton bias or straight or grain depending what I do with this piping afterwards. On my samples, a light blue on the top is a bias. All of these others on the middle, those ones are straight or grain. And then my little strip that I have as a demonstration, that one was cotton bias. So really doesn't matter, it's just where you want to apply it later on that matters. And then we'll just fold the fabric over. There's a groove inside underneath this foot, and the filler cord will just nicely stay on that groove, and it's so easy to create the piping. And even if I didn't cut my fabric strip perfect, doesn't matter, because the knife will trim excess out and I have a beautiful, perfectly cut piping. Some of the techniques on this class that I have will be now to do with the 4-thread overlock. These are just a more generic kind of a techniques, things that I don't have time to do it in the first class because we go through lots of the basics, and there was some more time on this class.
So I have started to set my machine for the 4 thread. So what that goes, again, going through the checklist, the first thing I needed to have is to have both of my needles, which I have inserted. And then I have my stitch length. Again, I have the range, so I left mine at a 3, and I'm using the standard side of the length knob. The width, this time I'm having the widest possible seam, so I have it at 7.5. Stitch selector, I only put to A. Overlock on a wave selector, I have not touched that one yet. I will do a little sample on that later. And then again, I'm not using the chain stitch this side, so those don't matter. And then, as always, anytime we do overlock, if we have an 8-thread serger, you need to make sure that your upper loop selector is up. I have not used that one. That was that knob right there that says up. So anytime I do the overlock, it needs to be up. Blade, I have my blade back engaged. I have a knife cover. That's again all in an 8-thread. But here's the important thing, that whenever we were doing a flat lock stitch for the 2 threads, we had engaged the subsidiary looper. So before I threaded my loopers, I had taken my subsidiary looper out of the way. So the subsidiary looper, that was the piece that we put over the upper looper so that it carried the lower looper thread. Well, I can't leave that one when we have thread. It can break it. It can get caught. So I had to take this one out first before I threaded the loopers. So that's why, again, I've been kind of like a broken record, keep saying the same thing. Go through the checklist first and then do the threading. So I threaded my machine, the left needle, right needle, upper looper and lower looper. So I'm ready to go. So this time the technique I'll be doing is piping. Because we can do piping in a sewing machine, you can buy ready-made piping, but we can also make piping in our serger. And here's just some little samples I played with a little bit on the different sizes of pipings. This first one is actually not even a piping filler cord. It was just a cord I had on my stash, so I used that one as a sample as well. This one is more a home decor. It's a Pam Damour kind of a home decor piping. It works great. This is another one. Actually, all these 3 in here, they are from Pam Damour, the Decorating Diva. These pipings has different thicknesses. So this works great with the 4 thread. Then this is something that really is not designed for this one, but I also used even heavier kind of a piping. This time I had to use the 3 thread overlock narrow, not the 4 thread. So that's just a little bit different kind of ones. But this is what I'll be doing this time. I'm just using normal filler cord, but there was a showing that different size of filler cords will work. Well, we do not really have a piping foot. They don't call it a piping foot. They call it a cording foot. Depending on a machine, the 4-thread machines, we have 2 versions on this one. There's the B3 and B5. What the number means is the size of the groove that is underneath. So if they call it a cording foot, even though it has a letter P for piping. So on the 8-thread sergers, we only have the 5mm wide. But depend if I have a heavier cord on the 4-thread ones, you might want to use the 5mm wide. So let me snap this one in. So what that groove does, it helps us to keep my filler cord in place. And the best to getting started is to have your filler cord, especially if you go those a bit heavier ones, put your filler cord underneath your pressure foot first, onto this guide, right under the guide, so that this all the way, if I put it right in front of it, it may get stuck a bit, but if I have it all the way there, it'll make it a bit easier. And then I have a strip of fabric. This one I cut on bias. If I want to go around the curves, that's when I need to have it on bias. But if I just want to go in the straight, I don't even have to have it on bias, but this is the scrap I had. So then I will put my threads out of the way. So I'll put the cord on the wrong side of this fabric. I know my cord is just a tiny piece. And I'm going to wrap this around. So my knife will be trimming all the excess out. And we're going to get it a little bit closer. There we go. Try to keep my hands away. It doesn't always work. Again, really it doesn't matter how wide my piece, even if I don't have them perfectly matching, because the knife will cut excess out. That's what I like with the serger technique. Let me rotate the hand. Will I get my knife all the way up so I can get even a bit closer because my piece of fabric is so tiny. And I was using the knee lever to lift my presser foot up in there. There we go. So I'm gonna wrap it around, and then all I have to do is just to keep that fabric snug over the piping and then look onto that. So all I'm doing, I'm just keeping it snug. Gonna do a few stitches and then I snug it there. Going so fast there, so let me just get that fabric there. So here we have all my starting threads, but here is my piping made in a serger. If I want to have a narrower finished seam, I could move my knife a little bit closer. But that way it is just a perfect size for the groove is perfect size for this kind of piping cord, and it just finishes up nicely.
Well, if I can make piping, I sure can install it as well. So on these samples, and I'll be showing these live samples also, but this one on the top left, I have used just the store-bought piping, and then it's been attached between 2 layers of wool fabric. The black and white is the one I will have as a demonstration. And this one in the bottom, this was it was actually covered with linen, like thin linen. I made my own piping, and then I attached between 2 layers of upholstery fabrics. So I'll be using the same foot, the same technique. So again, watch my live demo for that one.
Well, whether we made the piping in a serger or it was already made, like in this case, we can attach it with the serger. This one was already made piping, sandwiched between the 2 layers of fabric and serged. This was the piping that I had done in a sewing machine, and then I just used the serger to attach it between the 2 layers. Well, some other than little scrap samples, I'm going to show a couple of projects. These little placemats that are done all in a serger. And this one, there's a little baby piping. So instead of using really thick piping, I just have a little baby piping between those rows. And then this back, between the sections, there's a little piping as well. So how do we do that? Well, okay, so here I have a couple pieces of fabric. I'm gonna put this piping between those 2 layers. This one I just done sewn in a sewing machine with using the purl and piping foot. It could be the one I just used in the serger, or it could be store-bought. If possible, again, I'd like to have that little excess, especially this one is a little bit thicker piping. So I will put those fabrics, lift my presser foot so I can get that excess piping underneath. And I want to have that piping filler cord to be under my groove. Again, the same way as I was guiding the piece of fabric that when I was doing the piping. And then I take my other piece of fabric, put it right sides together so they're all sandwiched. Kind of awkward to try to do this around the camera and try to keep my fingers out of the way. But I can still feel that that cording is inside that groove. And my little piece is kind of short, but that will work. My knife will then cut again the excess off. Just keeping those layers together. It almost automatically keeps that pillow cord and the piping inside the groove. So here we have perfect seam. Great for home decor or like that placemat and the back that I showed earlier.
Well, what else could we use with this cording foot? Well, we can use it to put zippers with the serger. And I find lots of times that it's almost easier to put the zipper in a serger than sewing machine. And often I get kind of funny looks when my students when I say that next thing we're gonna sew a zipper and we don't have a zipper foot. We'll use the cording foot. So that same B3 or B5 foot that what I use for making and installing the piping. But the important, and I highlighted on my instructions that we need to use plastic zippers. We can't use metal zippers. So on the pink one on here is just the ordinary zipper. But the ones I really like are these maker zipper or then the spam more zipper tape, because these ones I just cut the length I need and then I will put those zipper pulls and make my own zipper. The one little pack that I will create on this class, I had used it, I had run out of the zipper pulls on that one, so I had added just the white zipper pulls, so I can mix and match and make my own zippers that way. But the important thing is that that zipper is, I put at least 2 inches longer than needed. I often have it either 3 or 4 inches longer. And that's the nice thing about these maker zippers or the zipper tape is that I can cut the extra length I need. So I'm not really wasting anything like your normal zippers that you may have to buy much longer than you really need. And this one, we pretty much gonna be stitched in the same way. We'll just treat this zipper coil as the same as what we used in a piping. So again, watch for the live demo for that one. Well, here's just an image of some of the zipper packs that I had done. And on these ones, I just showing that you can, depending on how you fold the fabric in the end, you can make it into a triangle shape. On this one, there's only half the zipper used. And then on this one back, I had put the zipper on the top together with piping. So on this back, I have piping and the zipper at the same time. So that was a little extra. It was one of the classes we had done a long time ago. But just want to show some examples of the zipper back.
For the next technique is how to put the zipper with the serger. I kind of find that sometimes putting zippers in the sergers are easier than in a sewing machine. So here's just a really simple zipper pack that I'll be doing as a class on my example. But this one, I just had a piece of quilted fabric and then serger zipper in the edge, and then finally did the 2 side seams, and I have a bag. There's another version, little humbug bag, where the zipper was put in, but then depending on how I sewed the side seams, I got a little triangle shape. This one was one of the Serger clubs that we done quite some time ago, where there's only one side of the zipper used, and then sewed it around the piece. That way we can have the zipper end really nice. So that was another one done in the Serger. Here's a bag that I used a little bit heavier zipper this time, and this one is actually cork fabric that was decorated with the cover stitch. Might be a class one of these days. Then this was an older Serger Club project that we had done, where it was a piece of fabric and we used just half of the zipper tape again, and when I open it up, it is just one piece of fabric. This is a long time ago we done this as a project, and when you close it, it turns into a little spiral tube. It's been squashed on my back for quite some time. So it could be used as a put the rotary cutter or pencils and things on it. Well, the zippers that we can use in the Serger, they must be plastic, nylon plastic, no metal zippers. And one of the things also is that we need to watch these metal ends. So several of the normal zippers have these little stops. So we want to keep those away from the knife and the foot. So that means that your zipper needs to be several inches longer than the piece that we would normally need. The great thing to use are these zippers by the yard. They are different companies. This is Pam Damore. That's the one I had used on that pack that was using cork fabric. And it just comes those extra pulls, and you can add more pulls. The maker zipper, that's another great one. I use this a lot because there are no stops. So that's just a little strip on those kind of maker zipper one that there's no top stops. So I had to remember, if I pull this zipper all the way closed, it's gonna come out. So just to kind of careful not to pull it all the way. So what I often do is I put one pin in the edge, or those clover clips are great to hold it in place. That way I can't accidentally pull it open. You can put it back in, but there's an extra step which we can avoid. There are a couple ways to put the zippers in. Sometimes people tell to put it in when the zipper is closed. I normally put them on when the zipper is open. So again, try either way and see which one you like the best. I'm using the 4-thread overlock, which means that zipper coil will be very close where my needle will be, so I don't see too much zipper tape on my stitching. If I use a 3-thread narrow overlock, meaning I only have the right needle in the machine, that way then there's a little bit of a more zipper showing up on this one, so I don't go so close to the zipper tape. Again, either one of those stitches will work. I'll be using the 4-thread overlock this time. And I have still the settings pretty much the same as before. My stitch length is as 3 on the standard side. Stitch width is the widest. My knife will be chopping off a little bit of this zipper tape. It doesn't matter, it's gonna be all overcasted. And then I have just a little piece of a pre-quilted fabric. And as for the foot, I'm still using the cording foot because it has a groove where the zipper coil can go in. We don't have a zipper foot for the Serger, so we use the cording foot. And this one I use the P5. If you have the 4-thread Serger, you could use either the P5 or P3 because this coil would fit on the 3mm one as well. So again, I have my zipper opened somewhat, and my zipper is way longer than needed. And I'll be sewing it on the shorter sides of that rectangular piece of fabric. And I will put this one right sides together. So whichever side would be my right side on my fabric. And then my zipper will be going to pull down. And this time I need to make sure I take this other side out of the way. And so that zipper coil is towards the fabric. If I have it the opposite, if I put this one, I'm gonna cut off my zipper coil. We don't wanna do that one. So I'm gonna put it this way. And again, it's easier if I have my piece way over longer, my zipper longer than needed. That's why I like those make a zipper by yard, those ones. So I'm gonna put this one on the presser foot, and I put those raw edges together. My knife will be cutting off a little bit. That's all right because it gets overcasted. And all I had to do is just guide my zipper coil on that groove. And when I'm finished on this side, I need to make sure that I don't pull my zipper tape this way because then my knife would cut it off. I need to pull it towards the left, so I'll just go off the edge of the fabric. Here's one side of the zipper put in. For the other side, again, I'm keeping the my zipper pull flat, zipper pull against the fabric, so that I have my right sides together, and I take this other end and I would lay it on this side. Well, how do I get them lined up? Couple ways, couple little tricks. I could pull this one up. Let me see if I can move my hands away a bit. I will just fold those edges together, and I know this is where I want to have my other end lined up. I could mark it, or this is the time that I do use one pin. I put the pin on the edge. I put the pin this way, and then I can open my zipper pull. And this is important again, is that if you use the zipper by the yard like this has been, just to have your pin or clover clip to hold this end so I don't accidentally pull it through. Because this time I want to, again, I like to sew this zipper on the top side. I could have it otherwise, I could sew it this side, but this heavier quilted fabric, I couldn't really feel it as good. So if I sew it this way, I can see the zipper. And I'm just gonna now lift the presser foot up and gonna scoot this one under. This is where I like to use my knee lever to drop my presser foot down. Again, I love that knee lever on my machine. And then I have all it lined up. Before I start stitching, I'll take my pin out. And then I just go ahead and stitch the same way. That's why it's handy to use zippers that don't have any stops, because I can just sew all the way off the edge. So here's my zipper done, 2 easy steps. To make this into a bag, I will close it a little bit, and then I could give a little finger press on it, or even if I wanted, I could top stitch it, either serger or cover stitch side. I'm just gonna keep those edges together. I could put my standard foot in the machine, but this time I'm just gonna use this foot. And yes, I can have my knife to cut the zipper tape. That is one reason we use the nylon zippers, never ever the metal ones. Again, I'm just trying to keep those edges together. Let me get a couple stitches, and then when I have my needle down, I will get my thread tail, and if I pull this thread tail towards me, kind of under the foot, that will get my other edge pretty. And I go a little bit slower speed. And one thing also that you may want to do is when going over that zipper coil, I have really thick fabric in this case, so I have a couple layers of fabric and zipper. So this time I often go by hand a little bit just to get over that really thick zipper coils in there. There we go. I think I'm past. Oh, that was really thick material. There we go. After get that heavy part. This is like really thick fabric I'm using this time. And I would do a little bit of a tail so I can weave that tail inside to have it all secure. But that's one side. Then for the other side, just gonna make sure that my zipper pull is about halfway so I can still open it up. And the reason I like to often fold my fabric this way instead of having my zipper on top, because that is really thick to try to get through if I do it on a fold like this one. I've done it on some of the ones, like that one that was with the cork fabric, but most times I just put it this way. That'll make it a little bit easy to go over all those layers, and especially this fabric that is super thick. I don't know why I picked up such a thick one in here, but just to show that we can do it. Again, when I get a couple stitches on the fabric, let me get that thread tail, and then I can tie this one, and then I'll be going off the edge. When I go past this in here, again, I'm gonna use the hand wheel. Let me take my pin out. I can now feel that it's going through all these heavy layers. It has hard time going through, so that is why I want to be nice to the machine. Our paper lock sergers, the needles go straight down, so we have a lot more piercing power than most sergers. Oh, there we go. There's a little bit still the thick part in there. There we go. Here. Again, I'm going to have a bit longer tail so I can weave that one in. And here's my zipper back. Let me turn it right side out. I could use a little bit of a tube turner. Poke those corners and give a press with an iron. These are great bags. I've done many bags this way. We could do also a little bit prettier one that we have a lining, so that way my zipper wouldn't be showing up on here, but that was just a quick way to just in the class what we normally do to show and how we can make a quick zipper back and put the zipper with the serger.
For the next 4-thread overlock technique, we will be attaching elastic, and the foot to use on this one would be elastic foot. Because I could try to hold the elastic and stretch it and kite the elastic and the fabric at the same time, that is too hard. If I use the elastic foot, it will keep my elastic in place, so all I have to do is to kite the fabric. It also keeps that elastic under tension. So depending on my elastic and my fabric, I get a little bit different amount of gathers. So I'll point those tips when I do the live demonstration. But this is the best way to put elastics in the overlock, is to use the elastic foot. On the 8-thread sergers, the foot has a white knob, and a 4-thread sergers, it is a black knob. Works exactly the same. I can adjust the tension, lefty loosey, righty tighty. So if I want to have the elastic stretched more, I will tighten that little knob. and this little guide on the front will keep my elastic in place. And this one, important is that's really on the settings wise. I'm still using the 4-thread overlock, but this time the longest possible stitch length, because if I have very short stitch length, then there's no space for this elastic to relax. On this sample, it looks like my stitches are close together, but they were 4 millimeters apart. When I stitched them, it's just when the elastic relaxed, it made those stitches look closer together. So that's the only change.
The next technique is, let's put elastic with the serger. I'm using the 4-thread overlock. We can also use the cover stitch, and I'll do on the number 4 class a sample how to do also the elastic with the cover stitch side. But this one is a great one on sportswear, and here I have an example of gonna swimwear fabric, and it's just shown on the edge. This time I had not stretched the elastic, but then I could just wrap it over and top stitch either serger or cover stitch. That way my elastic would never roll inside the seam. So it's a great way to put elastics on the waistbands. This one I had the elastic under the pressure to stretch it, but that way I would just wrap it again and I would have a really nice casing. Well, how do I do this one? I don't have to hold the elastic tight, because sometimes if I search and I will pull the elastic, I'm kind of fighting with the feed dogs. That is why I'm using the elastic foot. Yes, we were using on the number 2 class the elastic foot also to weave a cord or fishing line, but elastic foot obviously can be used to put the elastics. And this one I have a little pretty elastic, little underwear elastic. So because it has those picots, I'm gonna put these picots towards the left side. The easy way to put the elastic, because we need to get this one into the foot, so it's easiest to put it on the foot before you put the foot in the machine. This foot has a big toe. If it is an 8-thread serger, there's a white knob. If it is a 4-thread serger, the knob is black. Work the same way. And there's a piece of metal and a roller. We need to get this elastic between those ones. And this roller part is spring-loaded. And that is what this knob adjusts, is how much pressure we put. And I have it pretty tight. Let me move it up a bit. There are some guides, and sometimes the little guide may have come off a little bit, so I'm going to tuck it back there. But this little red line, and it shows where that elastic, where the pressure is for the elastic. I'm going to put a little bit less, because this elastic is very easily stretching, and also a fabric I'll be sewing is very lightweight. Again, this is something that you always have to do a test, because each fabric elastic combination will work a little bit different. But how do I get it underneath there, because it's kind of tight, especially when I had my screw all the way tightened. Well, here's a trick that I learned from one of the educators. If I take my elastic between my fingers, it's like a little fold. And then with my other hand, I'm just going to hold my foot. With the thumb, I lift this little guide out of the way, slide that one. So it just goes easy. Because I need to make sure that this elastic is caught underneath where my needles are. On my 8-thread serger, I have 5 places for the needles. I have currently the overlock needles, so I need to have my needles lined up with those dots. So this time I need to pull maybe a little bit further, because if I don't have my needles already catching the elastic, it's not going to be catching it very well. Well, then we have a guide that we can adjust to hold this elastic in place. Again, that is where that handy big screwdriver becomes helpful, so I can loosen it and move the guide further out depending on the size of my elastic. My elastic is really thick. I could pull it all the way out and even rotate it a bit, but this one is very narrow, so I can just put it there. So that way my elastic will stay nicely in place and it doesn't wander around inside the foot, because that way I can concentrate on just aligning up my fabric. Again, I'm using the 4-thread overlock. My stitch width, I still left at the widest at 7.5, but anytime I put elastic, I put my stitch length all the way to 4, the longest possible. Because if I have very short stitch length, I kind of attach that elastic so tightly on the fabric, there's no place to relax. So I want to have a longer stitch length so that whenever the fabric is relaxed, it looks like the stitches are very short, but actually they were further apart. You could also put a little bit of a differential feed on your machine, so that way you'll feed the fabric a bit more underneath to get more gathers, like that my little sample was. So we put the foot in, and I want to make sure that my elastic is still under there, which it is. And then depending on now how I want this to look, well, this one, I have this pretty one, so I may want to have this one to show. So I'm going to sew it on the right side. On these other two samples, I sewed it on the wrong side because that was an ugly elastic, so I can wrap it around and top stitch there. But this one is pretty, so I may sew it on the wrong side. And let me put my fabric underneath. I still have my knife available to trim off the excess. There we go. And then I will just stitch. Again, this is the thing, you want to do a test. You see, I'm not holding the elastic in place, it's just sitting there, and I'm just guiding the fabric. Well, if it looks like it's not gathering enough there, now it's starting to come out of the foot behind there. On this very lightweight fabric and this flimsy elastic, I think that looks pretty good, but if I tighten it a bit, lefty loosey, righty tighty, I'll get even more. And when I'm finished, if I can flip the toe a bit, that relaxes that elastic out of the way. So I got pretty good gathers because I said my elastic is very easily stretchable, and then my fabric was very lightweight as well. Again, if I had a little bit harder time, a stiffer elastic or stiffer fabric, I could put the differential feed up a little bit to gather the fabric at the same time. But now I could just top stitch it in a sewing machine, and I would have a pretty pie-cut edge elastic. So it looks like the stitches are close together, but they really were 4 millimeters apart.
Well, one more 4-thread technique. We can do gathers in the fabric and attach it at the same time. On number 1 class, I was demonstrating on how to use the differential feed and a standard foot to do gathering. But this one I'm attaching at the same time onto a solid piece of fabric. So here I need to use a ruffling foot, and it has a little leather G on it for gathering, but it's called the ruffling foot. And it has a little extra guide, because that guide separates my straight fabric and my ruffled fabric, so that the straight piece won't be touching my front set of feed dogs, and it will keep it flat. So again, I will do a little demo on this one.
For the next technique, I'll be doing some ruffles. Yes, we did some ruffles and gathers in the number 1 class, but this time I am attaching this at the same time. So there's only one seam on this one. The piece that it was attached was attached in the ruffle at the same time as the ruffle was gathered. This little table runner, this was a few years back on the National Serger Month webpage from the Baby Log. There was this project to do a table runner where the centerpiece was gathered and attached at the same time. So we did that as a Serger Club that time as well. So this one, I'll be using a gathering foot. Or actually they call the ruffling foot, but the letter has G for gathering. And this one has a little spring on the back, because the gathering, we still use the same trick as before, that we have the longest stitch length gives us most gathers. And if I put my differential feed all the way to 2, so that was the lever on the right side of the machine, I put it all the way to 2. So now my front set of feed dogs is taking twice as much fabric as the back is taking it out. Well, that will make my strip to gather. But if I want to keep one side flat, that is where this little guide becomes handy. Because this time I will put the fabric that is going to stay flat on the top of this blade. So this blade, this little metal piece, is covering my feed dogs. So the underside will be gathering when the top side won't. I could use this foot just to gather alone. But if you want to attach another piece at the same time, this is really important foot there. And again, it goes to machine the same way as any of the other feet. We do have a brand new foot. This is something was just introduced for the 8-thread machines autumn 2019. This one is called the shearing foot. And you first are looking here, well, what's the difference between my standard foot and my shearing foot? Well, there is a difference. See on the side, my standard foot is much flatter on the side. When this one, we have a nice pump. This pump is a great one to create a little bit more gathers when I just want to do a ruffle. And I had done a test. I took just the same piece of fabric. I gathered one strip with standard foot, one with this one, and there was quite a bit difference amount of gathers I got alone. So this one is a shearing foot when I just do a single layer, same as kind of what I used in the number 1 class with the standard foot. But this time, because we're gonna attach another piece, I will need to use the ruffling foot. So this time I have one longer piece that is gonna be my ruffle. I will put that one underneath the entire foot, and it will be right side up. Then the shorter piece that is going to be my flat piece, that goes on top, right side down. But instead of going all the way underneath the foot, this just goes onto that little slit. So I'm just going to put it there, try to keep my hands away. There we go. And then I'm going to start stitching. I'm gonna just hold those layers together until I capture all the layers with the needles. This is a time that I need 2 hands for guiding. I use my left hand to guide my top and my right hand or vice versa. I just want to have one hand to keep my top piece of fabric, another one for the ruffle. And the important thing is that the ruffle piece that is on the bottom, that I don't hold this one tight. The top piece, if I hold a bit taut, I gather more. So again, I don't want to hold it so tight that I can't have my feed dogs to pull my fabric through, but I can adjust the gathers a little bit more, so I can get a little bit extra gathers if I hold this one a bit tighter. Of course, I didn't have it enough caught up on my feed dogs, on my needles yet, so I'm gonna pull it out. So let me get it anchored first. And then on the bottom side, I have my knife still trimming, so I trim off a little bit on the ruffle. But the top side, I need to make sure I keep this edge right against on this guide, so that I don't wander off, because if I go too far left, I'm not catching it into my seam. So, okay, so let me go ahead and do a little bit. So it just kind of takes a little bit getting used to. It's like a tap your head with then wrap your belly at the same time. So here is my little Barbie skirt done. Ruffled, gathered, attached in the same time. It's a great technique.
Well, that is normally all the things that I have time to do in our hands-on class. But because I'm doing this as a video, I'm adding a couple bonuses on this one. I had a bonus earlier just showing on things, but these two I've got bonus 1 and 2 for the 4-thread technique. I actually demonstrate on my machine. So one of the techniques that I like using the 4-thread overlock is quilt as you go. So I have this little piece of, looks more like a pot holder, but these ones, the strips of fabrics are pieced and quilted at the same time. So on this one, I just put my stitch length to 3, and compared from the previous settings, if I had my differential feed at 2, I need to make sure that I have it back to end, because I don't want to try to gather it. And then I just use the standard foot, or of course I could use a clear foot or open toe foot on this one as well. But other tip is that because we have all these layers, there's going to be a total of 6 layers on every seam. And I put the list on how they're going to be layered. So we have 2 pieces of lining fabrics right sides together. Then we have a layer of thin padding. It's important to use fairly thin padding because we have a lot of bulk in there already. And then we have the 2 pieces on the top fabrics right sides together and 1 more thin padding. You can either sew it from the padding side. On my demonstration, I will flip it over and sew it on the other side. So either side will be fine to stitch in. But because we have 6 layers total, 4 layers of fabric and 2 paddings, we don't have a walking foot for the serger. So one of the things that does help is to lower in your pressure foot pressure a little bit. And I will show that in the machine how to do that.
whenever we do this class in the shop, we normally don't have to go through all the possible techniques. That's why we do a Serger Club, that we take a little project and do a certain technique in a class, or then some of the project classes. But because I have a little bit extra time on this video, I'm going to show you one more technique on this using the 4-thread overlock. And this one is quilt as you go. So I just have a little pot holder. Both sides are reversible. On some of the classes I've done a table runner, which is done the same way. So it's quilt as you go, so it is a reversible table runner. And how this one all starts is we're gonna layer multiple layers of fabric. So we'll start with first our ordinary quilt sandwich. So I have a piece of batting sandwich between 2 layers of fabric. And then I will put the one piece of fabric right sides together under, another piece of right sides together on top, and then batting, and we sew the seam. And then when we press this one open, we have a really nice finished seam on both sides, quilted and stitched at the same time. So how to add the next piece for this one? Again, this one would be like my first piece. So I have my, it's just a piece of fabric. So I have now pressed this one open. I'll take another piece of, this time the green fabric. I will put these ones right sides together. Line up the edges. And then I have my other piece of fabric, right side. And that goes on top of my right side on my previous stitching. And then I have a thin batting, and it's important to use fairly thin batting because we have 6 layers to go through, 4 layers of fabric and 2 layers of batting. And I'm gonna go on my machine, change my needle back to the standard foot, or I could use a clear foot or the open toe foot, any of those would work. And because I was using gathering bars, I'm going to put my differential feet back to N, stitch length back to 3. And if I put my stitch width around 6.5, I get perfect 1/4 seam. That my knife will be as my guide. So we have a pressure foot pressure. So on that one, I could then adjust that one a little bit too, to go through easier all these layers. Very seldom I use that setting. On my machine, it is the knob on the side. So if I go in a lower setting, that way my pressure foot doesn't push so hard and push those layers because we don't have a walking foot. Some of the machines is a knob on the top, so we just have to do lefty loosey, righty tighty. Use a screwdriver or even a coin to rotate it. Count the turns you do so that you can put it back where it was. Now I could either search it from the batting side or I can search it from the fabric side. On my first seam, I did from the batting side, so I'll do this one with the fabric side. And because of all these layers, I often lift my pressure foot, put the raw edges against the knife, and then I have the starting edge right in front of the needles. And then just to keep those layers together, and I'm gonna go for the seam. Here we have. Not much of a moving in there because I lowered the pressure foot pressure, but also because of the thinner batting I used. So now when I press this side and this side, I have another pretty pot holder. All I had to do is search around the edges, a pot holder or the coaster. I've done placemats this way as well, and also baby quilts.
Yeah, and then the bonus number 2. Yes, we can crochet with the Serger. I have a couple samples. There's a Halloween hat that has the edge. This is all thread. This little ruffle on this edge is just thread. The loopers I used black 12 weight cotton threads, and then I used on the needles metallic cold embroidery thread. And on this stocking, it's a similar technique, but this time it's a red metallic thread. These 2 projects are from the Overlock website, so those projects are there available if you want to make the whole thing. This stocking we have done as a Serger Club a couple times as well. But then this little baby bonnet. Yes, this is all just serged. It's not crochet. This is all serged. Only thing I started was a little piece of a ribbon in the back that I was able to use as a casing to pull the back together. And then I just searched and searched around on this one. And then how I made it the ruffle in the edge, I just played with the stitch length and a differential feed, and that's how you get it to ruffle. Most instructions tell to use 3-thread overlock stitch. I like to use the 4-thread because the 4-thread having that one more needle thread gives a lot more stability on my opinion. So again, that's my personal preference. And then on the stitch length, again, depends on your thickness on your looper threads, but also how dense you want to have this one. This baby bonnet, what I use, this thread that I have on my upper looper was very, very thin knitting yarn. So literally it was knitting yarn that I used on that one. And I searched it kind of slower speed, but it was still a lot faster to do this way than me crocheting it. Then I put differential feed at end or as needed. Again, if I want to keep it flat, I may have to ease it a little bit, depending again on the threads, but because it easily starts kind of ruffling on its own. If you want to ruffle it, you may want to put the differential feed lower or lengthen the sort of the stitch length. If you want to have your fabric to be flatter, you may have to ease it in a little bit, like 1.3. And then this is where I really like to use the clear foot. I could try to eyeball it with the standard foot, but the clear foot allows me to see through those stitches, and it is so much easier to sew with that one. On this baby bonnet, I did have a little piece of fabric, yeah, and it was actually ribbon. You have to have something to start your first stitch, but after that, you just can keep going as much as you need. And then occasionally you get a little sewing holiday, meaning you miss that edge of the on that previous stitching. That is no worries. Just go in a sewing machine, use matching thread, and do a little tiny zigzag to catch that hole, and just to fix a little sewing holiday.
This is something that I don't normally have time to do in a Serger class, but we do that every once in a while as a technique in our Serger club. Well, on this one, this on a little trim around the little Halloween hat. This one is just thread. It's called the Serger lace, and the glittery thread is just in the needle threads that I used gold embroidery thread, and the loopers I used a 12-weight cotton. Then this other little stocking, and the instructions for both of these projects are on the Overlock website. So that's just a little stocking, and the edge on this stocking has been done the same way, but this time my glittery thread is red metallic thread. So we can create fabric or Serger lace this way. And if you really go into it, you can make the entire baby bonnet this way. This one, all it is a 4-thread overlock. Only piece of fabric was a little piece of ribbon that I folded in half to give me the casing in the back for the silk ribbon, and that's where the stitching started. So I needed to have something to start stitching on the edge, but then all it is just stitching. And what thread I used on this one? The 2 needles and the lower looper was ordinary Serger thread. The upper looper was a really thin knitting yarn. And how did I get it to ruffle? I changed the stitch length and the differential feed to keep it first flat and then have it all ruffle later on. So let me go and change my settings on the machine a bit, and I'll show how we can do Serger lace. I have set the Serger still in the 4-thread overlock. My stitch width is the widest, and my stitch length I put just a little bit over 1 millimeter because I have 12-weight cotton thread in the upper and lower looper. Again, heavier your thread is, longer your stitch length needs to be. Most times these instructions are made so that they only use 1 needle, a 3-thread overlock wide. I just like to use the 4-thread for the reason is that it's a lot stronger lace when I have another row of stitching in it. So that's how all of mine are. Again, it's just my personal preference. Here's another little sample that came from a Overlock book that we were planning to do this as a class in the summer. So hopefully that gets to be a class using all kinds of Serger techniques. But that blue flower, all it is thread. Other than a little piece of fabric in the beginning that we can start stitching. So I just have a little strip of fabric. And because it is a woven fabric, I at the moment have my knife up. Later on, doesn't matter if I have knife up or not, I'm not trimming anything off anyway when I start stitching just. So let me just go do the first row. And my stitch length was very short, I actually lengthened it a little bit. And that is my first row. So the second row I'd be stitching so that my most left needle will just barely catch that previous stitching. I was using this first part, the standard foot, but this is really where the open toe foot or the clear foot. Clear foot is actually my favorite for this technique. I can have much more visibility. And this time I can lock my knife too, doesn't matter, I'm not gonna be going anywhere near. And this time I'm gonna line up my needles, and that's where this clear foot is handy because I can see, hopefully it shows in the camera, I can see how my second notch from the left is just catching the previous stitching. And then I will just run through my little leftover that I had on my looper thread, so I just noticed I run out. But see, I just caught that stitching from the previous ones, on the heads, and now now I would do my next row by just lining up my next row to go catching on the head and the edges of the previous stitches. So it's just going row and row after and after. If I don't catch, if I wander too much off and I have a little gap, that is when you take your Serger lace into the sewing machine and do a little zigzag to catch it. So it's not a mistake, it's a little sewing holiday. And most of mine, there are usually some little sewing holidays. So if I could close it, most likely find somewhere that I wandered off a little bit. And I just use the sewing machine to catch it. So anyway, so that's the way I made this whole baby bonnet. Just knit it, crochet it with the Serger.
And the last but not least, this is one of the coolest things. That is an exclusive paper lock stitch. Several of the machines we have a wave stitch, and I just love the wave stitch for different kinds of decorations, edge finishes. And this one was one of our Serger clubs for quite some time ago. It's a little pillow that I have, I think about 6 yards of fabric on this one. But the edge of this pillow, or this ruffle, I could have used rolled edge, but this time I used a wave rolled edge. So those two pieces of thread you see there is not variegated thread. They were two different colors of a thread. Well, the wave stitches. The machines that we have, those ones, we normally have some information on our quick reference threading guide that shows those stitches, and we often see even a little wave kind of image showing on those ones. They are officially 3 stitches, however we have a 4th one, and I will be showing those ones on the next slide how to thread for that one. But on this stitch we can do a 3 thread normal wave stitch, where my lower looper gets pulled occasionally on the top side, but my upper looper just shows a little bit every once in a while. Needle thread is just a straight line. Then we can do the rolled wave, which was on that little pillow edge. And then we can do a reverse wave, when my upper looper gets pulled underneath and lower looper gets pulled on top. So these ones I have listed on the quick reference guides for all the ones. But then let me go on here. I'm going to skip one and I'll come back to that one. If I wanted to do a 3 thread flat lock wave, that's a little bonus one. So I have the guide for this one and the threading chart on this one. So as all of these ones, we need to make sure that we are using the checklist and then the threading guide. And all of these ones we use the O2 or the right needle in the machine. The stitch length always varies depending on the thickness of the thread and how close I want those waves to be together. And then the width, I normally have the widest one on this three thread normal wave stitch. On the flat lock, we can't make it so wide. We need to put it at 3.5. And then the stitch selector, again, depending on what stitch it is, we have it on B, C, or then on this flat lock wave at D. And then we will do the wave selector. That's a little lever. We finally get to put it to wave. And then rest of these settings are the same as we have had previously. As for threading, on all these first official ones, the threading, we will have the kind of moved one slot over. Even though we have the right needle, the needle thread will be moved where we'd normally put the left needle thread. And then the upper looper thread gets moved one slot over. When if I do a reverse wave, the threading is still this way, but then the two looper threads just get swapped around. I'll show those ones on my little demonstration later. If we do the flat lock wave, this threading is very different, so it's very important to look this image. The looper threads, the lower looper still goes on this one the same spot, but then the upper looper is on that third slot from the right. And then my needle thread, instead of being on the first one from the left, is now on where the upper loop or overlock go. So very different kind of threading. So again, go through the checklist and then go through the threading. So we go back on this one. So here's a list of all those possible wave stitches that we can do. And the important is that to really have the effect is to use heavier or decorative thread in the loopers and a regular serger thread in the needle, because that will be just a straight line on those, on just to hold the stitches together. And the other important thing is that, and then I should say that best results you get if your two threads, the looper threads, are same weight, because that way my stitches look more even. And then we'll just thread the machine for the wave stitch and just make sure you go through the threading chart and make sure the threads go in the right spot. The location on the threads is important. And then here's my settings. And normally I just trim off a little bit edge of the fabric when I do in the edge. When we do a flat lock, then on that one, we'll do a fold and pull it flat like on those flat lock techniques we had before. But here's samples. This one is the one, this little kind of upholstery fabric is the one I have on my live demonstration. But some of these others I shown, there's a rolled wave, and this one is using heavier thread. So again, heavier thread, I have a longer stitch length. This one is in the edge of the napkin with the reverse wave. And here's this is a little zipper pouch that I use the white velvet in. And on this one, I have the flat lock wave.
Next technique would be to show the Serger wave stitch. This is an exclusive baby lock stitch. We have 4 different versions on this stitch. We have the standard wave, which I have on these samples. We can do a reverse wave, which on this napkin edge. So both sides will be showing very pretty on a little wave on reverse. This one I used embroidery threads. So I had 2 strands of blue thread in one looper, 2 strands of red in one looper, and then I have 1 strand in a needle. So there's actually a total of 5 spools, even though it is a 3-thread technique. So that was a reverse wave. And I said these were standard waves in here. And then we move the camera a bit. This is a flat lock wave, which is really an extra stitch that is not in the quick reference chart, but I'll be including that on my instructions. There's another one of those flat lock waves. Gonna use it quite a bit, either joining on 2 pieces of fabric together, or then just as a decorative on that little velveteen. And that little ruffle pillow, the edge on that ruffle, yes, there was about, I don't know, 6 yards of fabric, and it was all gathered with the ruffling foot, but then it was finished in the edge with the rolled wave. So it kind of looked like variegated thread, but no, it was had snazzy lock thread, the glittery thread in the upper looper and the lower looper. One was red, one was black, and one was white. So that is the fourth one of those. So we have a standard wave, reverse wave, flat lock wave, and a rolled wave. So let me go ahead and set the machine, and then we'll do some stitching. On the wave stitches, on our quick reference guide, on the 8-thread machines, we even have a little wave around the top of it. And on the left hand side, we have the 3-thread wave, the rolled wave, and the reverse wave. And the right hand side are just some combination stitches with the wave stitch and some of the cover stitches. I have threaded the machine for the 3-thread wave. So again, on my checklist, I only have one needle. So I've taken my left needle out, and then depending on the thickness of the thread, and then also how close I want those stitches to be, I will set up my stitch length. And then the width, to get the widest, I put it at 5. The important is that I put my stitch selector to B and my wave selector to wave. So stitch selector to B, wave to wave. And then I have my, at the moment, about 1.5, because I have a 12 weight cotton threaded for upper and lower looper. And how they are threaded, I go through my checklist, sorry to move around, because the rest of these settings are the same as before. But threading, again, the lower looper always goes in the same spot, but the upper looper and the needle threads have been moved like one slot over. So my needle thread is in the very first slot and my upper looper is in the second. But then the rest of the threading goes the same way. It's just where they go on my machine. So they are kind of pull the thread a bit taut. You see I have my needle thread, upper looper, nothing, and then I have my lower loop. So I have a little bit of heavier threads on my loopers. I just have a little piece of upholstery fabric, so I'll be going off the edge, and I have my knife cutting. So when I rotate the handle, my knife is coming up. So this time my upper looper and lower looper will be laying the thread on the top and bottom, kind of alternating. And you may hear a little extra noise in the machine because that machine, when it changes the tensions to get that wave stitch. You may hear a little bit different sound every once in a while when those settings were changed. And here we have it. So this one, again, the lower loop, I had a little pink thread. So underside, it will look pretty much solid. On the top side, it will pull that lower looper occasionally on the top. And then my upper looper will just go in and out. So in this stitch, the lower looper thread is used more than the upper looper thread. If I wanted to do a reverse wave, it would be very easy change. My checklist would be exactly the same as I had on my previous stitch. Only difference is on the threading. On the threading, on this stitch, the upper and lower looper, they go the same way on the thread delivery area, but on the threading boards, they get twisted. One goes, the upper looper goes to upper and lower slot, and the normal lower looper will go to upper. So that's the exception, that the lower looper will not go in that same slot as normally does. But that will create then a reverse wave. The rolled wave, the threading is exactly the same as on my standard wave. Only change on the settings is that we will use the rolled hem side and we put the stitch selector to C. So pretty simple to go all of these ones. And then I will show on my descriptions when I have it on kind of the handout information. I will show the threading for the flat lock wave, because that's not an official stitch. It was something just that the educators discovered, that they can cheat the machine and make it have it to make a flat lock wave also. So I've been using that quite a bit because it's just a fun finish.